They laughed while I scrubbed their filth. Not the polite chuckle of shared amusement, but the kind of laughter that cuts deep, the kind that says you're not in on the joke because you are the joke. I stood there at Victoria's pristine marble sink, my hands submerged in greasy water that had long since turned cold, listening to the symphony of their cruelty echoing from the dining room. "Look at our little maid service," Victoria's voice rang out, sharp and clear as crystal. So dedicated to her work. A chorus of laughter followed, each voice adding its own note to the mockery. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white, watching the bubbles in the dishwater slowly pop one by one, like tiny dreams dying. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, washing their dishes on Thanksgiving, a holiday supposedly about gratitude, while they treated me like I should be grateful for the privilege of cleaning up after them. Victoria appeared beside me then, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the marble countertop. "Oh, Mia," she sighed dramatically, "you've missed a spot." Without warning, she picked up a greasy dish towel and tossed it directly at my chest. The dirty fabric hit me with a wet slap, leaving a stain on my cream-colored sweater. "Clean faster," she commanded, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We have more dishes coming." I caught a glimpse of myself in the black window above the sink. There I stood, 36 years old, college-educated, reduced to a servant in my own family. My reflection looked tired, defeated. But if you looked closer, really looked, you might have seen something else flickering in my dark eyes. Something that had been growing stronger with each passing humiliation. Behind me, Madison, my sister-in-law, added her own poison to the mix. "I don't know how she stands it," she stage whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. If that were me, I'd have run away by now. Where would she run to? Victoria replied with mock concern. "This is the best life she's ever going to get." I closed my eyes and let the cruelty wash over me like I had learned to do so many times before. 15 years of this. 15 years of being treated like an unwelcome guest in what was supposed to be my own family. As I opened my eyes again, I noticed my reflection had changed. The corner of my mouth had lifted into the faintest hint of a smile. Soon, I thought. Very soon. Victoria's house was a monument to everything she believed herself to be: superior, untouchable, perfect. Every surface gleamed. Every piece of furniture had been chosen not for comfort, but for the story it told about the family's wealth and status. The dining room table could seat 12, though tonight it seated only 10, each place setting worth more than most people's monthly salary. Victoria lorded over it all like a queen holding court. At 59, she still carried herself with the imperious bearing of someone who had never been told no, never been denied, never been made to feel small. Her silver hair was styled in waves that wouldn't dare fall out of place, and her jewelry caught the light from the crystal chandelier with every gesture she made. My husband Ryan sat at her right hand, as always. 38 years old and still seeking his mother's approval like a boy showing off a good report card. He had barely looked at me all evening, too busy laughing at his mother's jokes and nodding along with her stories about their family's supposed superiority. Madison, the golden daughter, held court on Victoria's left. Everything I wasn't: blonde where I was brunette, tall where I was average height, successful in the kind of career that impressed people at cocktail parties. She practiced law at a firm that bore her grandfather's name, a detail Victoria never failed to mention when introducing her. Madison just made partner, Victoria announced to no one in particular, though her eyes found mine in the kitchen doorway. Youngest woman in the firm's history. Such accomplishment runs in our blood. The emphasis on "our" hit exactly as intended. After 15 years, I still wasn't part of their blood. I was an outsider who had somehow infiltrated their perfect world, a stain they couldn't quite wash out. The cousins and aunts and uncles all played their parts in this theatrical production. They laughed at the right moments, made appropriate sounds of admiration, and most importantly, they treated me exactly as Victoria expected them to, as if I'd barely existed. Uncle Charles, Victoria's brother, had actually walked past me 3 times without acknowledgement before finally grunting when I handed him his coat. Aunt Patricia had handed me her empty wine glass without so much as a glance, assuming I would refill it because that's what the help does. But it was the children who hurt the most. Madison's twin boys, 10 years old and already learning to look through me like I was furniture. When I'd tried to engage them in conversation earlier, they'd stared at me blankly before running back to their video games. Children are so perceptive, Victoria had mused, watching the interaction. They instinctively know who matters. I thought about my daughter then, about Olivia, brilliant and fierce at 14, away at the boarding school we'd scrimped and saved to afford. She'd wanted to come home for Thanksgiving, but I'd encouraged her to stay for their special program. Better she should be surrounded by peers who respected her intelligence than this den of vipers who would only try to tear her down for being my daughter. At least, that's what I'd told myself. The truth was more complicated. The truth was, I needed Olivia exactly where she was, doing exactly what she was doing. Everything was going according to plan. As the evening wore on, Victoria's cruelty took on a more theatrical quality, as if she were putting on a show for her guests. She had always been creative in her methods of humiliation, but tonight she seemed particularly inspired. "Let's play a little game," she announced, her voice cutting through the post-dinner conversation like a knife through silk. "Mia, darling, come join us in the living room." My stomach nodded. Victoria's games were never fun unless you were watching someone else suffer through them. I dried my hands on the kitchen towel, steeling myself for whatever fresh hell she had concocted. "I call it guess the price," Victoria continued as I reluctantly entered the living room. All eyes turned to me, some curious, some already smirking with anticipation. "Mia, I want you to guess how much each item in this room costs. Let's see how well you fit into our world." She gestured grandly at the living room, with its antique furniture, original oil paintings, and carefully curated collection of objets d'art. Each piece had been chosen not just for its beauty, but for its ability to remind visitors of the family's wealth and refined taste. "Start with that vase." Victoria pointed to a delicate Chinese porcelain piece on the mantelpiece. "Take a guess, dear." I could feel the trap closing around me. If I guessed too low, I was ignorant and uncultured. If I guessed too high, I was presumptuous and reaching above my station. There was no right answer because the game wasn't about getting it right. "I'm not really sure," I began, but Victoria cut me off with a laugh. "Oh, come now, don't be modest. Just guess. We're all friends here." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Every face was turned toward me, waiting. I could see Ryan out of the corner of my eye, his jaw working like he wanted to say something but couldn't quite form the words. $2,000? I ventured. The laughter erupted like I'd just told the funniest joke ever heard. Madison actually doubled over, clutching her stomach. Victoria's eyes sparkled with malicious glee. "Oh, sweetheart," she gasped between laughs, "try 25,000. It's a Ming Dynasty piece. Of course, I wouldn't expect someone from your background to recognize such things." She moved on to the next item, then the next, each guess I made prompting fresh waves of laughter and increasingly cutting comments. The Persian rug beneath our feet was worth more than most people's cars. The painting above the fireplace was an original Monet that had been in the family for 3 generations. "You see," Victoria addressed the room as if I weren't there, "this is why bloodlines matter. Some people are born knowing these things and others." She gestured vaguely in my direction. "Others serve those who do." Through it all, Ryan remained silent. My husband, the man who had promised to love and protect me, sat in his chair like a statue, his eyes fixed on his brandy glass. When I caught his eye, he looked away quickly, a flush creeping up his neck. Even the help knows their place better than her, Madison chimed in, and the room erupted in fresh laughter. I stood there in the center of their circle, feeling like a gladiator in an arena, torn apart for their entertainment. But unlike a gladiator, I wasn't allowed to fight back. I was expected to smile, to take it gracefully, to be grateful for their attention even when it came wrapped in cruelty. Victoria's final blow came as the game wound down. "You know, Mia," she said, her voice taking on a tone of mock sincerity, "I've been thinking. This family has a certain reputation to maintain, a legacy to preserve. Some people fit naturally into that legacy and others." She let the sentence hang in the air like a noose. In that moment, 15 years of suppressed rage threatened to boil over. My hands trembled at my sides, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming. But I didn't scream. I didn't break. Instead, I smiled my practiced smile and excused myself to finish the dishes. As I walked back toward the kitchen, I heard Victoria's voice follow me, such a good sport about it all. Not everyone would handle their limitations so gracefully. I gripped the doorframe and allowed myself one moment to imagine what it would feel like to finally wipe that smug smile off her face. Then I returned to the sink, to the dirty dishes, to my role as the family doormat. But my smile had returned too, because Victoria had no idea that her little game had just sealed her fate completely. Standing at that sink, mechanically scrubbing plate after plate, my mind drifted back to the beginning. How had I ended up here? How had the girl who had once dreamed of changing the world become this woman, this shadow of herself, accepting cruelty as if it were her due? I was 19 when I met Ryan, working the morning shift at a coffee shop near his college campus. He was everything I thought I wanted: handsome, charming, from a family with money and connections. I was working 3 jobs to put myself through community college, living in a studio apartment that smelled like the Chinese restaurant downstairs. When Ryan walked into that coffee shop with his easy smile and his expensive clothes, he might as well have been Prince Charming. He asked me out on our 3rd coffee interaction, and I said yes before he'd finished the question. I should have seen the red flags from the beginning. The way he never introduced me to his family for the first year we dated. The way he made excuses every time I suggested visiting his home. But I was young and stupid and in love, and I convinced myself it was just bad timing. The first time I met Victoria, I wore my best dress and practiced conversation topics in the car on the way there. I wanted so badly to make a good impression, to prove I was worthy of her son. She greeted me at the door with a smile that never reached her eyes and said, "So you're the coffee shop girl Ryan's been slumming with." I should have run then. I should have grabbed Ryan's hand and walked straight back to the car. But I stayed. I smiled. I let her insults roll off me like I was waterproof, because I believed love could conquer anything. The pregnancy wasn't planned. We'd been married for 6 months, still in that honeymoon phase where we thought we could face anything together. When I told Ryan I was expecting, he held me and spun me around our tiny apartment, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. Victoria's reaction was predictably different. When Ryan shared our news at Sunday dinner, she went very quiet, very still. Then she asked if we were sure it was his. That was my introduction to motherhood in the Mitchell family. 9 months of subtle digs about my ability to be a proper mother, questions about whether the baby would take after my side or theirs, suggestions about nannies because some people are simply more naturally suited to childcare. Olivia was born on a Tuesday morning in October, arriving 3 weeks early as if she couldn't wait to enter the world. She was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a head full of dark hair, and the most alert dark eyes I'd ever seen. When the nurse placed her in my arms, I felt something I'd never experienced before: pure, unconditional love. Ryan cried when he held her. Victoria, who arrived at the hospital with Madison in tow, took one look at our daughter and said, "Well, she's certainly unique looking. Let's hope she grows into her features." That was 15 years ago. 15 years of watching Olivia grow into the most remarkable person I've ever known. Brilliant beyond her years, fierce in her convictions, unafraid to speak truth to power. She got all of that from herself because it certainly didn't come from her father. Ryan, who had once promised me the world, had slowly but surely chosen his mother over his wife at every opportunity. Every argument ended with him taking Victoria's side. Every family gathering became another exercise in watching him stand by while his family destroyed me piece by piece. But I stayed. I told myself I stayed for Olivia, that she needed a stable home, a complete family. I told myself that one day Ryan would find his backbone and stand up for us. I told myself a lot of lies over the years. The truth I couldn't admit, even to myself, was that somewhere along the way, staying had become survival. Not just physical or financial survival, but something deeper. I had become so small, so diminished, that the thought of existing outside of this prison terrified me more than staying inside it. At least, that's what I let them believe. The truth was much more complex, much more dangerous. The truth was that I had never been as helpless as I appeared. The truth was that every insult, every humiliation, every moment of cruelty had been carefully catalogued and stored away. The truth was that I had been preparing for this day for 15 years, and everything was about to change. As the evening wound down and guests began to filter into the living room for coffee and dessert, Victoria approached me at the sink with purpose in her stride. She wasn't done with me yet. If anything, the night's entertainment had only whetted her appetite for more. "Mia, dear," she began, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant she was about to deliver a killing blow. "I think it's time we had a serious conversation." The remaining dinner guests had gravitated toward the living room, but they were still close enough to overhear. Victoria had planned this perfectly, timing her final act for maximum audience impact. "You know," she continued, pulling out her phone and scrolling through it with deliberate slowness, "I've been doing some thinking about our family's future. About legacy. About what kind of people should carry on the Mitchell name." My hands stilled in the dishwater. This felt different from her usual cruelty. This felt final. "I received some very interesting information this week from my attorney," Victoria said, showing her phone screen to Madison, who had materialized beside her like a vulture sensing carrion. "Apparently, there are ways to restructure inheritance plans to ensure family wealth goes to those who truly deserve it." Madison's eyes lit up with malicious glee. "Mother, you can't be serious." "Oh, but I am, darling. Perfectly serious." Victoria's gaze fixed on me like a predator watching prey. "You see, Mia, I've decided to update my will. Your name will be removed entirely. Not a penny, not a piece of property, nothing. And I'm encouraging Ryan to consider similar adjustments." The words hit like physical blows. Around us, the room had gone quiet. Everyone was listening now, watching this public execution with barely concealed fascination. But Victoria wasn't finished. She reached into her purse and pulled out a handful of loose change, exactly $3.47 in quarters, dimes, and pennies. With theatrical deliberation, she threw the coins onto the floor at my feet, where they scattered and rolled across the hardwood. "Tips for cleaning," she said with a smile that was pure poison. "After all, that's what you're good for, isn't it?" The room erupted in nervous laughter. Someone actually started clapping. I stood there, my hands dripping dishwater, staring down at the scattered coins at my feet. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of putting up with this family's cruelty, reduced to $3.47 in loose change scattered on the floor like I was some kind of street performer. And then came the final blow, the one that cut deepest of all. Ryan, my husband, the father of my child, had been standing in the doorway watching this entire spectacle. When I looked up at him, desperate for some sign that he would finally stand up for me, he avoided my eyes. And then, so quietly I almost missed it, he nodded. He nodded, a small, barely perceptible movement that said yes, he agreed. Yes, I deserved this. Yes, he would go along with whatever his mother decided. In that moment, something inside me died completely. Not my spirit, not my strength, but my last shred of hope that this man I had married, this family I had tried so hard to be part of, might someday see me as worthy of basic human decency. I bent down slowly and picked up every single coin, one by one, while they all watched. I could feel their eyes on me, feel their satisfaction at my degradation. When I had collected every penny, I stood up and met Victoria's gaze directly. "Thank you," I said quietly. And I smiled. Victoria looked momentarily confused by my reaction, but before she could say anything else, we heard the front door open. The sound of familiar boots on the hardwood floor, a backpack hitting the floor with a thud. Olivia was home. She stood in the doorway like an avenging angel, though you wouldn't know it to look at her. At 14, Olivia had inherited my dark hair and eyes, but where I had learned to make myself small, she had learned to take up space. She was tall for her age, with the kind of presence that made people notice her even when she wasn't trying. Tonight, she wasn't trying to blend in at all. She surveyed the scene before her with the cold, analytical gaze I knew so well. The scattered family members clutching their wine glasses, Victoria still holding her phone like a weapon, me standing by the sink with my hands full of dirty change. Nothing in her expression gave away what she was thinking, but I knew my daughter well enough to recognize the signs. Olivia was furious. "Hi, Mother," she said, her voice perfectly level. Not Mom like she usually called me, but Mother with the kind of formal distance that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. She was wearing her boarding school uniform, navy blazer, white shirt, plaid skirt, knee-high socks. But something was different tonight. Usually, Olivia carried herself with the loose-limbed casualness of a teenager. Tonight, she stood with military precision, her laptop bag clutched in one hand and something else in the other. Something small and red that caught the light. "Olivia, sweetheart," Victoria began, her voice taking on the false warmth she always used with my daughter. "What a lovely surprise. We weren't expecting you home until tomorrow." "I caught an earlier train," Olivia replied without looking at her grandmother. Her eyes were fixed on me, taking in every detail of my appearance. The stained sweater, the defeat in my posture, the coins still clutched in my fist. "How wonderful," Victoria continued, oblivious to the danger she was in. "You can join us for dessert. Though I'm afraid your mother has been keeping busy with her duties." Olivia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Her duties?" "Well, yes, dear. Someone has to clean up after dinner. Your mother is so good at it." The room chuckled nervously. They were all watching this interaction like it was dinner theater, waiting to see how the young princess would react to learning her mother was really just Cinderella. Olivia set her laptop bag down carefully on the counter. Then she turned to face the room full of adults, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Actually, Grandmother Victoria," she said, and there was something in the way she said the name that made it sound like a curse. "I think there's something you all need to see." She opened her laptop bag and pulled out a sleek MacBook Pro. But it was the small red object in her other hand that drew my attention. A USB drive. Identical to dozens of others hidden throughout our house, each one containing carefully cataloged evidence of everything this family had done to us over the years. What could a child possibly need to show us? Victoria asked with a dismissive laugh. "Shouldn't you be upstairs doing homework or playing with dolls?" Olivia's smile widened. Oh, I don't play with dolls anymore, grandmother. I play with much more interesting things. She opened the laptop and powered it up, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced ease. The screen came to life, and I watched my brilliant, terrifying daughter prepare to change our lives forever. I think you'll find this very educational, she said, her voice still perfectly pleasant. After all, everyone here seems so interested in teaching my mother about her place in this family. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Around the room, people shifted uncomfortably. Ryan, finally seeming to sense that something was wrong, took a step toward his daughter. Olivia, maybe this isn't the best time. Oh, Daddy, she said, turning that smile on him. I think this is the perfect time. The laptop screen glowed in the dimmed dining room light as Olivia's fingers danced across the keyboard with the confidence of someone who had spent years preparing for this moment. I watched my daughter work, feeling a mixture of pride and terror that she had inherited not just my intelligence, but apparently my capacity for patience and planning. I think you all should see something interesting, Olivia announced, her voice carrying easily across the suddenly quiet room. Gone was any pretense of childish excitement or teenage awkwardness. This was Olivia in full control, and it was both magnificent and terrifying. The screen displayed a login page for something called Nexus Solutions. I had never seen it before, but something about the sleek design, the professional layout, felt familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. What is this, dear? Victoria asked, though her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. She couldn't quite hide the note of unease creeping in. Oh, this is just my mother's little hobby, Olivia replied sweetly, entering a username and password with practiced ease. She's been working on it for, about 15 years now. Haven't you, Mother? All eyes turned to me. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, watching the ground crumble beneath my feet. I had no idea what Olivia was about to reveal, but her confidence suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. I don't know what you're talking about, I said quietly, which was the truth. I genuinely had no idea what was on that screen. That's okay, Olivia said with that same sweet smile. I think the demonstration will speak for itself. She hit enter, and the screen changed. What appeared made several people in the room gasp audibly. It was a sophisticated business interface, with charts, graphs, client lists, and financial data. At the top of the screen, in elegant script, it read, Nexus Solutions, Strategic Consulting for Personal Transformation. Victoria leaned forward, squinting at the screen. What exactly am I looking at? My mother's business, grandmother. Her very successful business. Madison pushed closer, her lawyer instincts kicking in. This is ridiculous. Mia doesn't have a business. She doesn't even have a job. Olivia turned to her aunt with the kind of pitying look usually reserved for very small, very stupid children. Aunt Madison, just because you've never bothered to ask what my mother does during the day doesn't mean she doesn't do anything. She clicked through several screens, each one revealing more details. Client testimonials, service packages, a portfolio of successes. Everything professional, polished, legitimate. And the numbers, the financial projections and revenue reports made several people in the room go very, very pale. This can't be real, Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia, what is this? I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I had been running a small freelance consulting business for years, helping people with organizational systems and personal management. But this was something else entirely. This was a multi-million-dollar operation. Mother's been very modest about her work, Olivia continued, navigating to a client list that made my blood run cold. Names I recognized. Important names. Powerful names. People who could destroy reputations, end careers, ruin lives with a single phone call. Nexus Solutions specializes in what you might call strategic relationship consulting, Olivia explained, her voice taking on the tone of a professor giving a lecture. Helping people navigate complex family dynamics, workplace hierarchies, social situations where the power balance is uneven. Victoria's face had gone ashen. What kind of consulting? Olivia's finger hovered over the mouse. The kind that turns the tables, grandmother. Would you like to see some case studies? The room was dead silent now. Even Uncle Charles had put down his brandy. Everyone sensed they were witnessing something momentous, something that would change everything, but none of them understood what yet. I don't understand, Madison said, her voice shrill. Mia doesn't have the education for this kind of work. She doesn't have the connections, the background. That's where you're wrong, Aunt Madison, Olivia said, clicking to another screen. My mother has the most important qualification of all. She knows what it's like to be underestimated. And with that, everything changed forever. The next screen that appeared made the room collectively hold its breath. It was a client portal, and at the very top, highlighted in gold, was a case study titled, Operation Mitchell, a 15-year strategic implementation. Victoria's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Red wine spread across the expensive wood like blood. What is that? She whispered, pointing at the screen with a trembling finger. Olivia smiled that terrible, patient smile. That, grandmother, is you. She clicked on the file, and suddenly the screen filled with detailed profiles. Photos, financial records, social connections, behavioral patterns. Not just Victoria, but Ryan, Madison, Uncle Charles, and Patricia. Everyone. 15 years of carefully documented evidence, all organized with clinical precision. You see, Olivia continued in that same lecturer's tone, my mother's business specializes in long-term strategic planning for people who find themselves in disadvantageous positions. Undervalued employees, overlooked family members, anyone who's ever been told they don't matter. She scrolled through page after page of data. Victoria's shopping habits, her charity affiliations, her investment portfolio. Madison's client list, her romantic relationships, her hidden gambling habit that the family wasn't supposed to know about. Ryan's browsing history, his secret credit cards, his afternoon golf games that never seemed to involve any actual golf. The beautiful thing about being invisible, Olivia said, is that no one pays attention to what you're actually doing. They assume if you're washing dishes, that's all you're capable of. If you're quiet at dinner, you must have nothing interesting to say. I watched the faces around the room cycle through disbelief, confusion, and dawning horror. These people who had spent 15 years treating me like furniture were finally beginning to understand that the furniture had been watching them all along. This is insane, Ryan said, his voice cracking. Mia, tell me this isn't real. I met his eyes for the first time all evening. Which part did you want me to tell you isn't real, Ryan? The part where your family has systematically destroyed my self-worth for 15 years? Or the part where you stood by and let them do it? But you don't. You couldn't. How could you afford something like this? Madison sputtered. Olivia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, Aunt Madison. You really think my mother's intelligence stopped developing when she married into this family? Nexus Solutions has been profitable since year 2. Currently grossing about $12 million annually. The number hit the room like a physical blow. $12 million. Per year. I watched the math begin to work in their heads. 15 years of profits. 15 years of them assuming I was dependent on Ryan's modest law firm salary and Victoria's allowances. It started small, Olivia continued, clearly enjoying herself now. Just my mother helping other women in similar situations. Women married to men who didn't appreciate them. Women with mothers-in-law who thought cruelty was a form of entertainment. She clicked to another screen, This one showing a network diagram that looked like something out of a spy movie. Lines connecting names, relationships mapped out like a conspiracy theorist's dream. The referrals started coming in. Powerful women who needed help dealing with powerful men. Politicians' wives who were tired of being political props. Executives' daughters who wanted to inherit what was rightfully theirs. CEOs who needed certain board members to reconsider their positions. Victoria found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. "This is blackmail." "Oh no," grandmother Olivia said, shaking her head sadly. "This is business. Blackmail is illegal. My mother runs a perfectly legitimate consulting firm. She just happens to be very, very good at her job." She clicked back to the main screen, where the financial summary glowed like a neon sign. Assets in 8 figures. Properties across 3 states. Investment portfolios that would make most hedge fund managers weep with envy. "You want to know the funny thing?" I said, speaking for the first time since Olivia had begun her presentation. "I never needed Ryan's money. I never needed Victoria's approval. I stayed because I wanted Olivia to have a family. I thought a broken family was better than no family at all." I looked around the room at these people who had made my life hell for 15 years. I was wrong. Ryan stumbled backward, groping for a chair. The mortgage payments, the car loans. "Jesus, Mia, I thought you were barely keeping us afloat with your little consulting jobs." "Those weren't to keep us afloat, honey," I said gently. "Those were to maintain the illusion that I needed you." The room erupted in chaos. Madison demanding to see documentation, Uncle Charles asking about legal implications, and Patricia wondering aloud how they could have been so blind. Through it all, Victoria sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that the woman she had spent 15 years trying to crush had been playing a game she didn't even know existed. And winning. As the chaos died down and the reality of the situation began to sink in, Olivia calmly closed the laptop and fixed her attention on Victoria. The old woman looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of revelation. "But there's more," grandmother Olivia said softly. "You see, Nexus Solutions doesn't just help people build wealth and influence. Sometimes we help them reclaim what was stolen from them." She opened her backpack again and pulled out a thick manila folder. 15 years of preparation. 15 years of documentation. Every insult, every humiliation, every moment you made my mother feel worthless has been carefully recorded and analyzed. Victoria's eyes widened. "You can't be serious. You were just a baby." "I've been recording family dinners since I was 7 years old," Olivia said matter-of-factly. Amazing what people will say when they think a child isn't paying attention. She opened the folder and began laying out photographs. Screenshots of text messages. Transcripts of conversations. Medical records showing the stress-related health issues I'd developed over the years. Therapy sessions I'd attended trying to rebuild my self-esteem. "Did you know that emotional abuse is now legally recognized in many states?" Olivia asked conversationally. "It's amazing how much the law has evolved in recent years." Madison, the lawyer in the room, went very pale. "Olivia, you don't understand the implications of what you're suggesting." "Oh, but I do, Aunt Madison. I understand them perfectly. You see, I'm not just Mother's daughter. I'm also her business partner. I've been learning from the best strategic minds in the country since I was old enough to use a computer." Ryan looked like he was about to be sick. "Mia, please. We can work this out. We're family." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it whatsoever. "Family?" "Ryan, you nodded when your mother threw money at my feet like I was a beggar. You stood there and watched her tell me I'd be written out of the will, and you agreed with her." "I didn't mean." "You meant exactly what you did. I cut him off. You chose her over me. Again. Just like you have every single day for 15 years. Olivia continued laying out documents like she was setting the table for dinner. "The beautiful thing about patience," she said, is that it allows you to be thorough. Nexus Solutions has helped our clients recover millions in assets that were wrongfully denied them. We've helped them rebuild relationships with children who were poisoned against them. We've helped them reclaim their dignity, their power, their lives. She looked up at Victoria with those dark eyes that missed nothing. But mostly, we help them understand that revenge is a dish best served with overwhelming evidence and airtight legal documentation. Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out strangled. "What do you want?" "Want?" I echoed, stepping forward for the first time since this all began. "I don't want anything from you anymore, Victoria. I don't need your money. I don't need your approval. I certainly don't need your love." I walked to the kitchen island where Olivia had spread out her evidence like a general planning a war. "Do you know what I realized tonight, watching you throw change at my feet?" Victoria shook her head mutely. "I realized that I've been playing the wrong game this entire time. I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, useful enough, someday you might see me as worthy." "But worthy of what? Your respect? Your family's acceptance?" I laughed bitterly. "Why would I want the respect of people who have so little of it to give?" Ryan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Mia, please. I know I haven't been the husband you deserved, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can." "Ryan." I turned to him, and for a moment I felt almost sorry for him. He looked so lost, so confused, like a child who'd been told Santa wasn't real. "Do you remember our wedding day?" He nodded uncertainly. "Do you remember what you promised me? To love and honor. To forsake all others and cleave only unto me," I finished. "But you never forsook her, did you? You never chose me over your mother." "Not once." Olivia pulled out her phone and showed the screen to the room. "Would you like to hear what Daddy said about Mother in his therapy sessions? The ones he's been attending for 6 months and never mentioned to her." Ryan went white as paper. "You can't have access to that. That's confidential." "Oh, sweetie," Olivia said with mock sympathy. "You'd be amazed what people will tell a teenage girl who's good with computers and even better at making people trust her." She began reading from her phone in Ryan's voice, a perfect imitation. "I know my mother's hard on Mia, but Mia makes it worse by being so sensitive about everything. Mom just wants what's best for the family. If Mia could just learn to fit in better, not take everything so personally." Each word was like a knife. Ryan had been in therapy, ostensibly to work on our marriage, but really to justify his cowardice to himself. "That's enough," Victoria said suddenly, her voice sharp with command. "Enough of this performance. You've made your point. What do you want? Money? Property?" A formal apology. Olivia and I looked at each other, and I saw something pass between us. A moment of perfect understanding between mother and daughter. "Grandmother," Olivia said softly, "I don't think you understand. We don't want anything from you." Victoria's brow furrowed. "I don't understand. You can't fix this with money because we already have more money than you do," I explained patiently. "You can't fix this with apologies because 15 years of cruelty can't be undone with words. And you can't fix this with promises to change because we simply don't care enough about you anymore to wait and see if you mean it." The room had gone completely silent. Even the ticking of that grandfather clock seemed to have stopped. "So what happens now?" Madison asked quietly. I looked around the room at these people who had made my life hell for so long. Victoria with her proud face cracking like expensive porcelain. Ryan with tears in his eyes, finally understanding what he'd lost. Madison calculating legal ramifications like the lawyer she was. Uncle Charles and Aunt Patricia and all the rest, frozen like deer in headlights. "Now," I said, "now we leave. Olivia and I will pack our things and move into one of our other houses. Ryan, you can stay here with your mother. That seems to be what you've always wanted anyway." "Mia, no," Ryan said desperately. "Don't do this. Don't take Olivia from me." "I'm not taking her," I said gently. You forfeited your right to make that argument when you chose your mother over your daughter's happiness for 15 years. Olivia will make her own choices about whether she wants a relationship with you. I suspect she's been making those choices for a while now. Olivia packed her laptop and papers with clinical efficiency. I'll be 18 in 4 years, Daddy. Until then, I choose to live with the parent who actually sees me as a person rather than a trophy to show off when convenient. Victoria stood up suddenly, her chair toppling backward. You can't do this. You can't just leave. What will people think? What will they say about the family? I stared at her for a long moment, this woman who had made my existence a living hell for 15 years, and I felt nothing. No anger, no hatred, no satisfaction. Nothing at all. Victoria, I said quietly, for once in your life, that's not my problem to solve. As Olivia and I prepared to leave, the weight of 15 years seemed to lift from my shoulders all at once. I felt light, almost dizzy with the sudden absence of all that accumulated pain and rage. Around us, the Mitchell family stood like statues in a museum, frozen in their shock and disbelief. Victoria made one last attempt to reassert control. You realize this will destroy everything, she said, her voice cracking. The family reputation, the business connections, the social standing. You're willing to tear down everything we've built out of spite. Olivia looked up from packing her laptop. Grandmother, the only thing you've built is a house of cards held together by fear and cruelty. Mother just stopped bothering to keep the wind away. I paused in the doorway, looking back at these people who had once held so much power over my life. You know what the saddest part is? I said, this didn't have to happen. If you had just treated me like a human being, if you had shown me even basic respect, I would have happily spent the rest of my life washing your dishes and pretending to be grateful for the privilege. Ryan stepped forward, reaching out as if to touch my arm. It doesn't have to end this way. We can still fix this. I moved aside, avoiding his touch. Ryan, when did you last tell me you loved me? Without me saying it first, without it being in response to something. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence stretched out between us like a chasm. That's what I thought, I said. Olivia shouldered her bag and walked to where I stood. For a moment, she looked like the little girl she'd been, the one who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares and whisper secrets in my ear. But then she straightened, and I saw the woman she was becoming. Strong, brilliant, unafraid. Mother, she said formally, addressing the room, should we tell them about the rest? A chill ran through me. The rest. Olivia's smile was sharp as broken glass. About the other clients we've been working with. The board members at Mitchell Associates who've been very interested in Uncle Ryan's creative approach to client billing. The investors in Grandmother's Charity Foundation who might be curious about where all those donations actually go. Victoria went completely white. You wouldn't dare. We wouldn't, I said quickly, and I meant it. This was never about destroying you, Victoria. This was about freeing ourselves. Olivia looked disappointed but nodded. Mother's right. Revenge is easy. Rebuilding is harder. Madison stepped forward, her legal mind clearly working overtime. What about custody? Divorce proceedings? Asset division? Ryan can keep everything that was his before we married, I said. But everything I built, everything I earned, everything that came from my work stays with me. Olivia will live with me. She can visit her father whenever she chooses. And if I fight you in court? Ryan asked quietly. Olivia laughed. Daddy, you're a small-town lawyer with a drinking problem you think nobody knows about, married to a woman worth more than you could earn in 10 lifetimes, who has documentation of 15 years of emotional abuse. What exactly do you think you're going to win? The truth of it settled over him like a heavy blanket. Ryan Mitchell, who had always lived in his mother's shadow, finally understood that he had lost more than he could even comprehend. But as I watched him accept his defeat, I felt something unexpected, pity. Not enough to stay, not enough to forgive, but enough to remember the young man who had once spun me around our tiny apartment, both of us laughing at the promise of the future. "Take care of yourself, Ryan," I said softly. "Both of you." Victoria straightened, some of her old imperious mask sliding back into place. "This isn't over." "Yes," I said, meeting her eyes one last time. "It is." As we walked toward the door, Olivia slipped her hand into mine. It was the first time she'd done that in years, and for a moment I was overwhelmed by how much I had missed it. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I squeezed her hand and realized that for the first time in 15 years, I genuinely was. "I'm perfect, sweetheart." "We both are." Behind us, the Mitchell family stood in their perfect living room with their perfect furniture and their perfectly ruined lives. Ahead of us lay uncertainty, possibility, freedom. We walked out into the crisp November air, and I took my first breath as a woman who was finally, truly free. The funny thing about rock bottom, I realized, is that it gives you a solid foundation to build on. And Olivia and I were just getting started. 6 months later, I received an invitation in the mail. Victoria's 75th birthday party. An elaborately engraved card requesting the pleasure of my company at what was sure to be another exercise in family theater. I was sitting in my new house, a beautiful craftsman-style home in a neighborhood where nobody knew or cared about the Mitchell family name. Olivia was at the kitchen table, working on her laptop, probably making more money than most adults while calling it homework. "Should I respond?" I asked, showing her the invitation. She glanced up from her screen. "Do you want to go?" I considered it, really considered it. The old me might have gone, might have dressed up and brought an expensive gift and played the part of the gracious, forgiving daughter-in-law. The old me might have used it as an opportunity to show them how well I was doing, how much better I looked, how little I needed them. But the new me, the real me, had better things to do. I walked to the fireplace and tossed the invitation into the flames. "I think I'll be washing my hair that night." Olivia grinned. "Good choice. We've got that consultation call with the senator's wife anyway." "Right. The one whose husband thinks she's too stupid to balance a checkbook." "That's the one. Should be fun." I smiled, watching the invitation curl and blacken in the fire. Victoria had always said I knew my place. She was absolutely right. My place was wherever I chose to make it, with people who valued me, doing work that mattered. Some people are born knowing they matter. Others have to learn it. And some people, like the Mitchells, never learn it at all. But that was their loss, not mine. The fire crackled, the invitation turned to ash, and Olivia and I got back to work. We had empires to build, after all.